Welcome to Satsang. So beautiful to be together. We'll start as we always do with a question that's come in advance from our family online, and then we will open it up to any questions that anyone here might have. There's a microphone there, so don't be shy. Please feel free to come up to the mic, any questions that anyone has. But first we start with one that's come in advance. Many parents feel that they don't have time to spend with their children or on family life. Women who work outside have all of the care of the home as well. But full-time homemakers can feel that their horizons are too narrow. Where is the work-home life balance to be found? It's a beautiful question. Just one sec. Are you here? Is it just my monitor, or do you hear this like funny thing in the sound, or is it okay for you? You hear it also. Bhaiya, sound mein kuch garbad hai. Sound theek kar dena, sound mein garbad hai. Huh? Nahi, panka nahi hai, wo kuch aur hai. ठीक है, तो पंखा को बंद करा दीजिए. Anybody here know anything about sound? Anybody who happens to know something about sound who could come and help them figure out what the problem is would be great. That one. Okay. What is it? Okay, this one or that one? This one. Okay. Is it better now? Better in the back? Okay. So, yeah, by the way, this kind of goes in general. If there's ever a sound issue, don't worry about politeness. Like, feel free from anywhere to say, can't hear this, whatever it is, because we want you to be able to hear, and we want you to be able to hear well, and our beautiful guys are young boys, students, who are learning and doing their best, but please do let us know if there's any sound issues, volume or whatever it may be. So it's a great question around work and home life. The dilemma is that the way that most of us think about it isn't really right. The way that we think about it has to do much more with accomplishments we want to do, achievements we want to achieve, goals we want to reach on a very external level. I want to reach this goal in my work. I want to reach this goal in my family life. And so then we end up trying to balance them, much like you would say, well, okay, I want to have this piece of chocolate cake, but it's going to be this many hundreds of calories. I can only take in this many. It means I need to cut out this much chapati or dal or whatever it is. And you would balance it if you were on a diet. But life isn't like that. It's not about, let me have this achievement and therefore cut from here. In life, actually, all of the aspects have to be strong. One of my favorite stories about this is a story of 3 guys who are out on a boat in the middle of the ocean. And they start to fight. So you can imagine they're stressed out, their boat is lost in the middle of the sea. Naturally, they're going to start to yell at each other, and they do. And in order to kind of create some peace in the boat, they divide the boat into 3 parts. And they draw these invisible, imaginary lines down the center of the boat. Naturally, they weren't, out on a boat with duct tape, so they just make these imaginary lines. This is my 1/3, your 1/3, his 1/3. And at some point, 2 of the men look over and they notice that a leak has sprung in the 3rd man's part of the boat. And they get panicked. They say, oh my God, stop up the leak, like the boat's going to sink and we're all going to drown. And the 3rd man says, oh, don't worry. He says, it's only leaking in my part of the boat. Now, I love the story because obviously we all understand that a leak in any part of the boat, whether you've got imaginary and invisible lines or not, the entire boat is going to sink. It's one. Whether they drew lines with masking tape or markers or invisible ones, either way, a leak in the boat, the entire thing goes down. But in our lives, we do the same thing. We say, okay, I'm going to pay a lot of attention to this part of my life. And it's all right if, I don't spend so much attention over here because, hey, that's just my spiritual practice. Or, hey, that's just, this part. The dilemma is any part that starts to sink ultimately brings the whole boat down. And so when we talk about things, it's much more about how to keep the boat itself strong rather than how much time here, how much time there. Because then we're cutting ourselves into bits and pieces. Then we're literally drawing imaginary lines in different parts of our lives. So when you're looking at a home life and work balance, what I would say is look at your ultimate life goals. For some people, their dharma is in their work. There are people for whom that work is their spiritual practice. People for whom they leap out of bed every day, they basically would do it even for free because it's what they are on earth to do. And then there's people who are doing it because, hey, you got to put food on the table, or, I want to do something other than just raise the kids. And the problem with that viewpoint is being someone who takes care of the home is only narrow if you allow yourself to be impacted and influenced by people who don't live in your home, who don't live in your heart, whether it's people on social media, whether it's TV, whether it's magazines, but people who basically say, oh, you're only a housewife? Or, well, yeah, I know you take care of the kids, but what do you do? And there's been really sadly a lot of denigration and belittlement of the idea of being a homemaker, as though somehow you should also make sure you're doing something else. And of course, the more of something else you do, the more of your home you have to outsource. Nannies, daycare, cooks, frozen dinners, whatever it may be, we then start to outsource. Because there just isn't enough time in the day to do it all. And so what I would say is ask yourself, what in you feels like your highest dharma? For a lot of people, being home and taking care of the family is their highest dharma. Traditionally, it's been women, but I now actually know a lot of men who are, house husbands. Because either the woman happens to have a much higher paying job and it just makes financial sense for her to continue to go to work, or her work feels like her dharma in an even more impassioned way, whereas for the father, being a father feels like the Dharma. But it's critical that we not collectively accept a myth that says being in the home is a narrow life. But how do I balance this with a broader picture? Giving birth to and raising people, that's a huge task. I mean, it's so interesting. You think about being a teacher, for example. Well, nobody would say, well, that's not a job. Like, what else do you do? But if I'm a math teacher, all I'm doing is teaching your kids math. Whereas a mother is teaching them everything. And yet somehow being a math teacher is considered an appropriate job, and being a mother is considered something that you better do something else, otherwise you're going to feel narrow. So it's really important not to take that cultural viewpoint. On the other hand, if your job is your dharma and you feel that, well then, okay, then you have to outsource some of the household stuff. Hopefully your husband is going to feel like staying home is his dharma. Or you're going to have parents who live with you or who live down the block who are going to be super happy to take that over. But there's not an equation around how much time here, how much time there. And another thing that I think is really important also is there's no rule that says you have to have kids. I know a lot of people, very successful people, who have never had kids. People in their 50s, 60s, 70s, who are super, super happy with their lives because their work was their dharma. And there's nothing wrong with that. And so if you happen to be someone for whom there is a calling inside you, whether it's work, whether it's art, any form of art, whatever it may be, whether it's traveling, whether it's service, and you don't need to feel like you pop them out of your womb and only then can you serve them, like you feel open to serving those who other women popped out of their wombs. There's nothing wrong with deciding, I don't feel so called and compelled to have children, and I don't want to sell them short. Because if what you're trying to figure out is, I love my job is my dharma, how do I balance that with taking care of the kids? Well, that's a tough question. And it's a question that in many cases is better asked even before you have kids. Do you even want kids? Is that something you're doing just because it's like the thing to do? Or do you actually feel an inner pull to be a mother, to be a father, to start a family? So whether you are someone who feels like your job is your dharma, or your art is your dharma, or your service, or something else, and you don't feel so called to have children, or whether you are a mother or a father and being that feels like your dharma, and you really would rather not go to the office, either way, both are right. The only wrong scenario is trying to find a balance between things in which it becomes just about hours rather than about attention and focus and love. Because what children need, much more than your hours, is your attention. And you know, for kids to have a mother or a father who love their job and love their work and for whom that is their dharma, it's also wonderful. As long as when you are with them, you are fully with them. It may be fewer hours than you would like. It may be fewer hours than they would like. But make sure that the hours are hours where you're not distracted. You're not on your phone. You're not bringing work home. you're not watching TV, you're not reading the newspaper, but that you're fully, fully, fully with them. And the other last piece around this is that our children are only very young and in need of a lot of time and energy for a short period of time. And so maybe even if your work is your dharma, but you find you have kids, they're here, well, maybe for a short period of time, parenting can become the focus of your dharma. It's not forever. It's for a short period of time. And then slowly, they're not going to need nearly as much time and attention. Then you're going to want to spend time and they'll be like, Mom, I'm going off with my friends. Dad, get away. I want to be with my friends. So maybe for that period of time, you get to switch how you think about it in your mind and say, all right, well, the universe has given me these precious beings. So many people in the world are trying to have babies and can't. Infertility is a brand new epidemic. So if the universe has given them to me, it means that they are supposed to be my dharma. And so you shift the focus. So really there's an infinite number of ways of looking at this. As long as you look at it from a perspective of dharma, rather than a to-do list of the number of hours and trying to just balance it in that way. Because then you're not giving your fullness to anything. Then you're just counting hours. And you're going to feel like you're not giving enough at work and that you're not giving enough at home. And then it's a lose-lose situation. Great. Other questions? Yeah, any question that anyone has? Yeah, don't be shy. Come. You don't actually even have to wait for me to call on you. Just come up to the microphone.
This question can be a little longer because unless I explain
Can you speak a little bit more loudly?
I said this question can be a little longer because unless I explain you properly, maybe you will not able to understand what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
So basically,
try to make it as concise so that everybody can follow. Yeah.
So basically, yoga has been in my life before, but now I am doing yoga teacher's training course here. So there are a lot of understanding coming within me. I'm able to look into inward. And then I have a little apprehension that when I go back, probably when I am saying or speaking to my friends or to my family, the language what I'm going to use, the way I think now, maybe they will not able to understand that. So I kind of feel that will it be a kind of I will be left out or I will not be able to cope up with that or not?
Okay, great. So this is actually a really common question, although she's specified around language. But basically, you come onto a spiritual path, you learn so much, whether it's actual scriptural words and teachings and philosophy, or just the ideas, the concepts, the transformation. And then you go back, and now suddenly you speak a different language. And whether it's a different language because it's actually Sanskrit words, or whether it's a different language because it's just suddenly a language of spirit, a language of consciousness, a language of soul, a language of divinity. And the idea of somehow her being left out, her friends feeling left out, this kind of chasm. So, first of all, part of the package of going further on a spiritual path is inevitably there will be relationships that don't last. It's like if instead of coming on a spiritual retreat, you went away to some weight loss camp. And you came back and your clothes didn't fit anymore. Now, for most of your clothes, you might be okay with that. Happy that you lost the weight, happy to get rid of the old clothes. But maybe there's, a pair of jeans that you loved, even though they were your fat jeans, right? But it's worth it. Because now you're healthy. Now you're not carrying around a bunch of extra unhealthy baggage that weighs not only on the body, but the mind and the spirit and the emotions and the heart. And so you realize, okay, I loved those jeans, and now they don't fit. And the same thing happens when our body grows the other way, when we're kids and we're growing. It's wonderful to grow. Kids love it when they grow, except when they then outgrow their favorite pair of shoes or their favorite jeans, and parents have to, throw them away while the kids are sleeping because otherwise they won't let go of them. But we say, it's okay, it just doesn't fit anymore. I'll buy you a new pair. Now, relationships obviously are deeper than a pair of jeans or shoes, but the idea is the same. As you grow, as you transform, as you get healthier on every level, there are going to be aspects of your form or life that don't fit. And it may be certain habits. Going out and, getting drunk every Friday night, probably a habit that isn't going to fit anymore when you get back. And sometimes it's relationships. Because maybe that entire relationship was based around Friday night going out and getting drunk. And suddenly there's nothing in common anymore. Or maybe it's a relationship with someone who is stuck in negativity, stuck in illusion, stuck in jealousy, and all of the conversation was always around her stupid husband and your stupid husband, and suddenly you don't want to live like that anymore. Suddenly you don't want to spend hours being negative. And so the relationship, you've outgrown it. And that's a really common, as I said, inevitable part of any kind of growth. So on that hand, be ready for it. There will be relationships that don't survive. And that's okay. Because you can still love them. Just because you don't have anything in common anymore, it doesn't undo the beauty of your past. It just says we're not going to walk this next step together. We've walked all of these other steps together, and it's been beautiful. But this is where we take two different turns. And that's okay. But the other piece specifically regarding communication is interesting. Just because you've learned new words doesn't mean you have to necessarily use those words in your communication with people who won't understand them or who will feel alienated by them. Think of synonyms. Think of other ways of speaking. The same truth. You don't have to go back and, have this level of almost like an affected personality of now I speak Sanskrit, and now I speak consciousness, and now I speak this. And it is going to put people off. Because it feels like an affectation more than feeling genuine and real and authentic. All of these experiences and truths existed long before we were given words for them in any language. The soul existed long before someone said Atma. Use words and a way of describing it that they can hear. Because on a spiritual path, another huge aspect is bringing other people along. And if we all act so high and mighty and like we speak a different language now, we're going to leave lots of people behind. And the goal is to bring as many with us as we can. So it's wonderful that you have a new vocabulary. Use it with this Sangha. Use it with other people who are on this path who speak that language. But when you're with, your friends, I'll tell you a personal story about this. It's more shallow, it's less deep, but it's a similar situation. When I was in high school, I took French in high school. We had a choice between French and Spanish, and despite the fact that I lived in Los Angeles and speaking Spanish would have been very handy, nonetheless, I decided that French was the language I was going to speak. It was much more romantic, and so I learned to speak French, and then I went away for the summer. My parents sent me to a summer camp in Switzerland. Now, the way that French is spoken in Switzerland is quite similar to the way it's spoken in France, but there's a few little nuances that are different, particularly the way they do numbers, the way that there's some differences. And I came home from the summer in Switzerland as this high and mighty, because of course, my friends had spent the summer not practicing French. I had spent the summer speaking French. So not only was I way more fluent than anybody else was, but now I had this whole new vocabulary of how we do things in Switzerland. And not only was it obnoxious, but as the teacher kept correcting me and reminding me that we were speaking French, not Swiss French, threatening to, literally take marks off on every exam that I answered in the Swiss way rather than the French way. I realized that pride that I had, that love that I had, because that's what it was. I wasn't trying to show off. I wasn't trying to be obnoxious and better than thou and all of that. It was that summer had changed my life. It was huge for me. I was 14 years old. It was huge on so many levels. And the only way that at that time I knew to honor the hugeness of the change was basically to insist on speaking that language. But I didn't have to. And one of the aspects of maturity, of being adults rather than teenagers, is we understand that there's a way of honoring and celebrating the transformation that you've had without necessarily having to carry back a language that is going to alienate people or is going to make them think that you now think you're holier than thou and is going to create rifts between you. Use whatever language they speak, but use the same language to now speak your new truths so that they'll be able to hear it. I'll give you one other example on that, another personal example. When I first came to India, my personal transformation was 100% a spiritual transformation. It was about God. And it was about an experience of God that I had standing on the banks of the Ganga River. And as soon as I met Pujya Swamiji, it was about the Guru. So God and Ganga and Guru. And that was for me the pillars of my transformation. But when I called my parents, which I was supposed to do once a week on this trip, and every time I spoke about God or Ganga or the Guru, what they heard was, oh my God, she's been brainwashed, she's joined a cult, right? And I kept speaking God, and they kept hearing cult, and I kept speaking Ganga and Guru, and they kept hearing brainwashed. It was frustrating on my side. It was terrifying on their side. And what I finally realized, and it took me till I actually went back to America to realize this, was if I know my highest truth, God, Ganga, Guru. But if I speak God, Ganga, Guru, they hear brainwashed cult. They cannot hear God, Ganga, Guru. However, if I spoke about the schools we were building, the women's vocational training programs we were building, the medical care programs we were building, they could hear that. They could hear kids and girls and sick people. They knew I had a nature to volunteer since I was a kid. They could hear that. And that was actually true for me too. It wasn't as true as God, Ganga, Guru, but it was a lot more true than brainwashed and cult. And what I learned was that from a perspective of speaking truth, it was more true in the cosmic scheme of things for me to speak kids and women and schools and medical care because they could hear that, rather than to speak something that got so lost in translation that it ended up having the opposite effect. And you will find in your communication with them a way of speaking that is still true to you. Maybe not as true as all of this new vocabulary and way of being and way of expressing, but it's going to be more true than the arrogant or brainwashed or whatever way that they would think of you if you just carry this whole brand new vocabulary back. So figure out what is the way of speaking that is true for you and they can hear. Their vocabulary, your truth. And you'll find it. It'll take you some time. It took me a good 6-8 months with my parents. But you'll find it. And then suddenly you'll actually be able to communicate again. And maybe you can't share the absolute highest, deepest truths. But that's okay. That's what you have this group for. But you share truths that are what they can hear. And that's the best definition of truth. Yeah, beautiful. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your evenings. A beautiful morning and day to our family joining from all over the world. And so much love for you. Did you have a question? Are you here tomorrow? Yes, you are? Great. So tomorrow, raise your hand quickly, and we'll start with you. What is your name? Wonderful. We will start with you tomorrow.